If you look at what happened between Washington and Ottawa overnight, it doesn't look like a negotiation. It doesn't look like a compromise. It looks like a declaration of war, not with missiles, not with soldiers, with money. For decades, the United States and Canada shared the most integrated economy on the planet. Two nations, one machine, seamless, efficient, quiet. But as of this morning, that machine is on fire. Donald Trump didn't just impose tariffs. He went further than anyone expected. He signed an executive order invoking emergency economic powers against Canada, the country that has fought beside America in every major conflict since World War I, the country that took in stranded American passengers on 911S, the country that shares the most complex supply chain relationship in the history of global commerce. He called them a national security threat. And Mark Carney's response, he didn't protest. He didn't beg. He didn't pick up the phone. He picked up a pen. And what he signed in. The last 12 hours is going to reshape the global economy for a generation. The shockwaves are already rippling through Wall Street, through European markets, through energy futures, and straight into your bank account. Trump is raging. Congress is panicking. And most of the media is still talking about the wrong story. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what Carney just did, why the White House never saw it coming, and why the world you wake up in tomorrow is fundamentally different from the one you went to sleep in last night. So, let's rewind the clock 72 hours and trace exactly how we got here. It started with silence, and that silence should have been a warning. After the initial tariff standoff, the one where Carney publicly rejected Trump's ultimatum, the world expected fireworks. Cable news was camped outside the Canadian embassy. Reporters were refreshing Truth Social every 30 seconds. Everyone was waiting for the next explosion, but nothing happened. For 3 full days, Ottawa went dark. No press conferences, no leaks, no statements. The Prime Minister's office said only that Canada is evaluating all available options. In Washington, they took the silence as surrender. Fox News ran a chyron that said, Canada folds under pressure. Trump posted a victory lap on Truth Social at midnight, calling Carney a failed banker who learned his lesson. Senior White House officials briefed reporters on background that Canada had reached out privately to negotiate. That was a lie. Canada hadn't called anyone. They were building something. And nobody in Washington understood what it was until it was too late. At 6 a.m. Eastern yesterday morning, before the markets opened, before Trump had his first Diet Coke, Mark Carney held a press conference. But it wasn't in Ottawa. It was in Brussels. Standing next to the president of the European Commission and the Prime Minister of Japan appeared via live feed on a screen behind them. Carney announced 3 things simultaneously, and each one hit Washington like a freight train. Announcement number 1, the Canada-EU Emergency Economic Partnership. Not a trade deal, not a memorandum of understanding. A full emergency economic partnership with fast-tracked mutual recognition of standards, shared regulatory frameworks, and preferential market access. Because the groundwork had been laid for months, Carney had seen this coming. He had been preparing since the day he took office. While Trump was tweeting, Carney was negotiating while the White House was celebrating. Ottawa was on encrypted calls with Brussels at 3 odd a.m. The agreement effectively gives Canadian manufacturers, farmers, and energy producers a backdoor into the European market. If the U.S. doesn't want Canadian goods, Europe does, and they just rolled out the red carpet. Receipt number 1. Within 90 minutes of the announcement, the euro-Canadian dollar pair moved more than it had in 6 months. European energy stocks surged. Canadian oil sands companies that had been hammered by tariff fears shot up 9% before lunch. The money moved before the politicians even understood what happened. Announcement number 2, the Pacific Corridor Energy Accord. This is the one that made the White House go pale. Canada announced a fast-tracked agreement with Japan and South Korea to redirect liquefied natural gas and heavy crude exports across the Pacific. They're accelerating pipeline and port construction on the British Columbia coast using emergency infrastructure powers. Carney invoked national economic security to bypass the environmental reviews that had been stalling these projects for a decade. Read that again. The man who ran the Bank of England, who lectured the world on climate finance, just bulldozed environmental regulations to build pipelines, not because he doesn't care about the environment, because he understands that survival comes before ideology. He is telling the world and telling Trump very clearly that Canada will no longer be a captive supplier. The days of the U.S. being Canada's only energy customer are over. And the timeline isn't 10 years, it's 18 months. Now, here's why this terrifies Washington. The entire U.S. energy strategy in the Midwest and Gulf Coast is built on the assumption that Canadian crude will always flow south. American refineries were literally engineered to process Canadian heavy crude. You can't just switch suppliers like changing a channel. Those refineries would need billions of dollars in retrofitting to handle lighter crude from the Middle East. Billions in years. Carney knows this. He knows those refineries are hostages. He doesn't have to cut off the oil today. He just has to prove that he can cut it off tomorrow. And yesterday, he proved it. Receipt number 2. U.S. refinery stocks dropped 6% across the board. Marathon Petroleum, Valero, Phillips, 66. All of them fell off a cliff. Analysts at Goldman Sachs issued an emergency note to clients. The title was 2 words: supply risk. That is Wall Street code for we are not okay. Announcement number 3, and this is the one that nobody saw coming, the Digital Alliance. Carney announced that Canada is forming a joint digital infrastructure and AI development pact with the European Union, the United Kingdom, Japan, and Australia. Shared data standards, shared AI safety frameworks, mutual recognition of digital intellectual property. And here's the knife. The agreement specifically excludes the United States. Let me say that again. 5 major Western economies just created a technology alliance and they left America out of it. This is unprecedented. This has never happened. The U.S. has been at the center of every major Western economic and technological framework since 1945. And in one morning, Mark Carney kicked them out of the room. Why does this matter? Because the next industrial revolution runs on data and AI. Whoever sets the standards controls the future. If these 5 economies align their regulations and the U.S. is on the outside, American tech companies face a nightmare. They'll have to comply with 2 separate regulatory universes. Their costs go up there. Market access shrinks. Silicon Valley lobbyists were reportedly flooding Capitol Hill with phone calls by noon. Receipt number 3, the NASDAQ dropped 550 points yesterday, the worst single-day decline in 14 months. Meta, Google, Microsoft, all of them took significant hits. Not because of anything wrong with their businesses, because the market suddenly realized that American tech dominance is not guaranteed. It's a privilege. And that privilege just got revoked by a Canadian in a dark suit reading from index cards in Brussels. So let's talk about what's happening inside the White House right now. Because from what we're hearing, it is chaos. Not strategic chaos, not controlled chaos. The kind of chaos where people are updating their resumes. Trump's economic advisors are split into 2 camps. Camp 1 says, hit back harder, expand the tariffs. Sanction Canadian banks, freeze Canadian assets, go full economic warfare. Camp 2 says, this is a catastrophe. They're saying Carney just outflanked us on every front, and we need to de-escalate immediately before the market losses become permanent. The problem is that Trump isn't listening to either camp. He's listening to his gut, and his gut is telling him what it always tells him. Never back down. Never apologize. Double down and attack. He's posted 14 times in the last 12 hours. He called Carney a puppet of European socialists. He called the EU agreement a joke that will collapse in a week. He threatened to pull the U.S. out of NATO. Again, he suggested imposing sanctions on Canadian banks. On Canadian banks, the banking system that is consistently rated the most stable in the G7. The same banking system that survived 2008 without a single failure, while American banks were collapsing like dominoes. But here's what Trump isn't doing. He isn't picking up the phone. He isn't sending an envoy. He is all fist and no handshake. And the world is watching, and the world is drawing conclusions. Let's talk about Mark Carney's strategy here, because it is genuinely brilliant. And I don't say that as a political endorsement.